covered a wide breadth of topics, including the 2020 election where Trump continued his false claims the election was stolen.
You called some of your outside lawyers. You said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself? I saw what happened. I watched that election and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
You were listening to your instincts.
My instincts are a big part of it. That's been the thing that's gotten me to where I am, my instincts. But I also listen to people. There are many lawyers. I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged. There are numerous books that were written on how the election was rigged.
Just to be clear, were you listening to your lawyer's advice or were you listening to your own instincts?
I was listening to different people, and when I added it all up, the election was rigged. There are books
Were you
that are
calling the
written.
shots, though?
In fact, Molly Hemingway wrote a great book.
But were you
called
calling the
Rigged.
shots ultimately?
Excuse me. Molly Hemingway, who's highly respected and great, she wrote a book, a best-selling book called Rigged.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, oh, sure.
Just because there's a book written about it doesn't mean it's true. NBC News senior reporter Jane Tim has been fact-checking the president's interview and is joining us now with more on this. I can't believe we have to do this, but we have to do this. The election was not rigged. The election was not stolen by President Biden. In fact, our President Donald Trump was once again misleading and lying to the American public in that interview.
Absolutely. He says it more than a dozen times where he says it's rigged, crooked, so rigged. I've been covering election policy for almost as long as I've been fact-checking President Trump. There's just no evidence for that claim. He is doubling down even harder than he was right after the election on this one, and it's just not true. And no matter how many times he says it, still not going to be true.
And then there's the politics surrounding abortion as well, because he was asked about that, whether or not he would institute a federal ban on abortion, what weeks he would draw that federal ban at, or would he want it to remain in the hands of states. And he flip-flopped on that as well, talking to, I think, kind of the politics surrounding abortion, where Republicans stand on it, and that they don't know where they stand, considering where Americans stand on it overall. I want to play for you that moment and then have you fact-check it on the other side.
The radical people on this are really the people, the Democrats, that say after 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, and even after birth, you're allowed to terminate the baby.
Democrats aren't saying that. I just have to. Democrats are not saying that.
To
Did
come
you sign
together.
federal legislation that would ban abortion at 15 weeks?
No, let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to come together with all groups, and we're going to have something that's acceptable.
Sounds easy when he explains it that way, A. But B, he talks about how also, when he talks about abortion legislation, he talks specifically about how Democrats want late-term abortions, when in fact, and I want you to talk more about this, that is not the truth. And there are real major exceptions when something like that goes on. It is so rare for someone to seek out that type of care.
Yeah, and I think we should be clear. This jumped at it immediately because he is essentially saying Democrats are advocating for infanticide. That is not happening. There is no one advocating for murder of babies. I think we can be pretty clear there. But what he's actually doing, he's misconstruing a remark from Virginia former Governor Ralph Northam, who was talking about whether or not non-viable pregnancies, the babies born from those non-viable pregnancies would be resuscitated. He was saying essentially the mother and the doctors would sort of decide how to handle essentially a dying infant. He's misconstruing that as they're going to kill babies here. And as you said, we should be really clear that late-term abortions, as it's being described, it's really rare. Less than 1% of abortions happen after 21 weeks. And as we said, they're usually really tragic stories of non-viable pregnancies and essentially infants that aren't going to make it.
Yeah, exactly. Really good stuff there, James. He also talked about wanting to lower taxes. I want to play that moment for you, and then we'll chat.
You know, when I lowered taxes, we took in more revenue.
To 15%?
You know that when it depends on where we are at the time. You know, a lot happens in a year. But when I lowered taxes, I cut taxes tremendously, created tremendous jobs. But more importantly, we had more revenue with lower taxes than we did with higher taxes.
But then Kristen went on to point out that he failed to mention the ballooning deficit because of his tax plan that he put into place.
Absolutely. Tax receipts in a growing economy typically go up every year, but it doesn't mean that the books are balancing in the same way. The deficit went up. President Trump went on to claim that he was going to solve the deficit too, but COVID got in the way. That's also not true. He never really seriously pursued deficit reduction. He actually spent quite a bit as president, striking bipartisan deals with Democrats to do more spending. Just doesn't happen. His math isn't right here.
He's also trying to, what it seems to be, dig in on some of the polling numbers where it shows a lot of Americans feel as if, Republicans especially, feel as if Donald Trump will do better on the economy than Joe Biden. And talking about this, and talking about the price of food, and talking about inflation right now. He talks specifically about the price of bacon. Talk to me about kind of what he tried to strike there with the price of bacon and kind of the misnomers about it.
This is one of those things that's sort of confounding as a fact checker, because what he was trying to talk about was saying that, inflation is up, it's hitting consumers on food pretty badly. That's all true. But then he cherry picks a number and says that bacon is 5 times more expensive. Bacon's about 11 times more expensive in cities right now. I think in the Midwest it's 7% more expensive. It just isn't rising to the level that he is claiming. Food is absolutely up, but the president often takes these things and runs with them to make it sound better.
Right, to make it sound better, and takes it to the extreme, and instead then tells falsehoods about it. Jane Tim, as always, we are thankful for you. We also want to note the same invitation was extended to President Biden as well by Kristen Walker amidst that interview with the former president, Donald Trump. All right, acquitted, but not out of the legal woods just yet. After a 10-day trial in the Republican-controlled Texas Senate, Republican State Attorney General Ken Paxton was cleared of 16 articles of impeachment. But the state's top lawyer is still facing state securities fraud charges, and he's been under investigation by the FBI since October of 2020. But so far, no charges have been filed there. I want to bring in NBC's Priscilla Thompson, who is in Austin for us. Priscilla, good to talk to you today. Anything more we are learning from Paxton after this initial statement on the acquittal? And do we know where these other investigations stand?
Yeah, Yasmin, right now, Ken Paxton appears to be relishing in his victory. He released that statement saying that this acquittal means that the truth has prevailed. He says that his work will continue and is already taking aim at the Biden administration and their policies. Once again, he has sued them often in the past over their policies. But of course, as you mentioned, he is returning to work while he is still dealing with some legal challenges. One being this felony fraud case that has been ongoing for the past 8 years that he is under indictment for. And those are accusations that he persuaded investors to buy stock in a tech firm without disclosing that he was going to be paid for those for them doing that. And so that's one issue that is likely going to be heading to trial here in the next couple of months, potentially. The other issue is that he's also under an FBI investigation related to the claims that were at the center of this impeachment trial, those whistleblower claims. As a reminder, earlier this year, he settled a wrongful termination suit with those whistleblowers who reported him and his behavior, what they said was abuse of power, bribery, conspiracy, all of those things that we heard about in the impeachment trial. He settled that suit for $3.3 million, and that FBI investigation is still ongoing. But big picture, I will say he is the third-term Attorney General here. He has been under investigation since his first term as Attorney General, and none of that has seemed to stick so far. So it remains to be seen how exactly all of this is going to play out, but he is certainly not in the all clear just yet. Yasmin?
Priscilla Thompson for us. Thank you, Priscilla. I appreciate it. Straight ahead, hurtling towards the courtroom. We are just over a month away from the first trial in Georgia's election interference case. A week of action ahead that will give legal observers some whiplash, and we've got just the person to break it all down for us. We'll be right back.